Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, as always, presented by our great friends over at ScentLok. ScentLok is leaps and bounds, in my mind, the best clothing you could ever find, the best clothing system you could ever find for whitetail hunting. Whether you're going to Texas and it's 90 degrees or you're hunting in Nebraska and it's 5 degrees. They have the best system I've personally ever found, and that's why the BE1 toolkit from ScentLok is my best friend. So go check out ScentLok if you have not. I've got a good friend on the phone, a project, if you will, that I've been hinting at for a couple episodes now. I've got Joey Szatmary on the phone. Joey, how are you, man?
Good. How are you?
Man, I am incredibly excited. My favorite thing is getting people hunting. Now it's my understanding. Well, let's start with this. Up to this point, what is your experience with hunting?
5 years ago, I shot a squirrel with a shotgun. So that was pretty solid. And then I ate it. And then pretty much nothing until this year. This is my first, bigger game, whitetail hunting season. So I'm fairly new to the game. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. And, honestly, just blessed to have this opportunity that we'll be talking about, on the podcast. But yeah, man, I'm super new to the whole thing. So I'm just excited and hungry to get after it.
Now, before we begin this conversation and the goal for today, so if you haven't been following along, you don't know what's going on, Joey is flying here to Kansas. We're going to drive to Oklahoma to hunt with our good friends over at Liberty Ranch. And so I want to do a podcast kind of covering pre-hunt tips, questions, what to expect, and then come back post-hunt. Was it anything like you expected? Lessons learned, so on and so forth. Bear Archery is going to be covering this on their YouTube, so you can also head over there. We'll have some videos put out of just tips and tricks along the way. So you can head over to Bear Archery's YouTube, check it out there. But a project I'm really excited about because I love the growth of a new hunter. And so before we jump in, though, you do have to give us an introduction to yourself personally. You're super strong or something like that, right?
Yeah, I guess some folks would say I'm super strong. Unfortunately, the guys that I'm around are absolute animals. But yeah, so background on myself, basically was an athlete growing up. I was a big time football player, lacrosse player, wrestled a little bit, and then played college lacrosse. I got into weight training at a young age, and it was always something I was passionate about, something that was therapeutic to me, like a meditation, some would say, and just always about, getting better, for myself. And I used strength training to do that. So fast forward, after college was done, I kind of was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was contemplating working for the government, but then I always had this passion to help others with fitness and strength training, and pursue that as my full-time gig. And I ended up pulling the trigger on that. So got involved with being a strength coach and a personal trainer early on. So it's been over about 10 years since I started that journey, and then that led from one thing to the next, where I opened up my own gym. So just kind of been an entrepreneur, getting after it. I have tons of ideas, and, I love helping people. So I do that through strength training. And then I kind of got into the YouTube scene, early on, making videos and content of my own training and just kind of documenting the process. And it wasn't until probably the last couple of years where I really thought like I could grow this channel to be something unique and special. So I put a lot of time and effort and energy into doing that. And the YouTube channel hit over 100,000 subscribers. Social media has been really cool for me to share my message and grow and connect with people. Hence, how we linked up was through social. So yeah, so that's kind of that. On the side, I compete in strongman. So I'm a national champion in the sport of strongman. So if you guys watch World's Strongest Man, basically, I do all the same things, just at a lighter weight class. You guys normally, when you watch on TV, are watching, the heaviest and the strongest guys in the world. For me, I have a cap that I just try not to exceed my weight with. So that's the level I compete at. But I'm super passionate about the sport and just strength training in general. But I've competed in a lot of things for my entire life. So I kind of have that competitive, mindset, and just always trying to push myself and become a better individual. But I'd say that's kind of me in a nutshell. And I love the outdoors. I'm a guy who likes to be out in nature and have fun. I love just doing anything outside. I love to be outdoors.
I was trying to explain to my kids who was coming. And, usually I can just say they're a hunter, whatever. Daddy works with them through Pope and Young or Bear Archery, whatever. And this time I was telling my 3-year-old, I'm like, he's a strong man, and not meaning like physically strong, but like competes in strongman. And my son, he's 3, and so Superman, Spider-Man, Iron Man, all that stuff, that's all he cares about. And so if my son calls you like Iron Man or something, sorry, but that's the first thing he thought of, was like, oh, he's strong, he's a superhero. So I was like, well,
Yeah,
okay.
it's pretty funny. I don't think I look anything like Aquaman, but I've been out multiple times where people are like, they'll be like, yo, Aquaman, or they'll be like, is that Jason Momoa? And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, I get it, it's like a joke or something, but at the same time, it's happened enough where I'm like, okay, like, this has been like,
this guy?
yeah, like this is like the 5th time someone said this in like a, when I'm out at dinner or something. But it's funny you say that, because you can just say like, yeah, I mean, I'm totally cool with that. I would love to have, a super, hero name going on.
There you go. Well, before we jump in, let me give a quick thank you to our friends over at Three Rivers Archery. Very fitting, because Three Rivers is a place that not only are they the world's largest distribution for anything traditional equipment, but they're also a wealth of knowledge. So if you're just getting into the sport, or if you're just making the transition to shooting a recurve, Three Rivers is an absolute place you need to call, because the information is free. When I made the transition to a recurve, I spent hours on the phone with them talking arrow tuning and broadheads and brace heights and all sorts of things. So guys, go check out our friends over at Three Rivers Archery. Great friends of Bear Archery, great friends of myself, and they are a wealth of knowledge and the world's largest retailer for all things traditional. So go check out Three Rivers Archery. Joey, let's talk about the why. Like what switched in your mind where you thought to yourself, like, I need to get into big game hunting?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So growing up, kind of backstory is my grandfather was an entrepreneur as well, and he owned a machine shop. But something he always did on the side was, he made his own rifles and stuff, which was pretty cool. So I was always around it at a young age, and I was always, shooting and exposed to it younger. But I was always more into fishing for whatever reason. Like I was always grew up just like fishing, and my grandpa, I think, was a big influence in my life, and he wasn't hunting as much when I came into his life. He did that kind of earlier on. So for him, it was a lot of fishing, and then we did some small game stuff, but it wasn't anything crazy. But it for some reason, years and years went by, and then there was always kind of this itch to do it. And as I got more mature and as I got older, I kind of just missed almost like the man's rite of passage per se. And I feel like hunting is a really big part of that. And I feel like with the age we live in, right, there's so much busyness and there's so much technology and we're so connected and there's information overload everywhere. So for me, like when I get out and go into nature, it's a great disconnect. I find it, like I said, super meditative or therapeutic. And I kind of wanted to get back to the roots of, like those rites of passage that men would do, right? Like, so for me, being someone who's heavily involved with social media and have to be on my phone as a necessary evil, it's like my way to just tune everything out, go out there, be super focused and kind of in the moment with everything. But interestingly enough, kind of making this all come full circle, I'm a big reader and I love reading. I'm reading. There's always something I'm reading. My room has books everywhere. But there's a book called The Comfort Crisis. And I don't know if you've read that or not, but it takes place during a hunt in Alaska. And the whole book's premise is about getting uncomfortable and doing things, that you necessarily don't want to do, but the person you become from doing them. And I was so into this hunt that they were on in Alaska. And I just remember, and I'm every now and then I'll have something in my life or like a book or something that I'm like, that changed my life. But I remember putting that book down and I was like, I'm going to take action, like I'm going to start hunting. It's going to be something new for me. It's going to be uncomfortable at first because it's always tough being the new guy and not understanding everything and trying to figure it all out. And to be honest with you, I was intimidated, right? Like, where do you start? What do you do? Who do you talk to? How do you get involved with that type of thing? And, so that was kind of my reason why. And on top of that, I really want to get involved with the process of the hunt and harvesting and being self-reliant in a sense, right? Where I have these new skills that can really help me just be a better man, a better person. And so I've just been really excited to get into it, and I kind of immerse myself head first into it.
How old are you, Joey?
28.
28. Man, now I feel uncomfortable because I'm 28 as well, and I look like a child next to you. So now I'm uncomfortable. No, I asked that because, I've heard guys say it before. Like, I've waited too long. And I'm like, dude, you're 24. Like, you haven't waited too long. Like, there is no, and I get what they're saying. Like, I get the idea of like, well, your grandpa taught you, or like you've been doing it since you were 12, or, I get that idea, but there's also something super respectable about adult taking on thing, because it is a whole new challenge, and I'm not going to name any names, but I got to talk to a lady at the Pope and Young convention, and she didn't begin hunting until her kids were graduated and gone. And that's when she thought, she's like, I need something in my life. Like, I need something to take this over. And so you're talking 40, 45, and that's why I didn't say name, because I don't want to insult anybody on age. But and now she's killing like top 3 animals in the world, and I'm like, man, like, you talk about diving in head first, like taking trips to Africa and hunting Alaska, and it's just like, gosh. And so that's what I like. If you're listening to this podcast, and my whole goal in life is to teach and inspire hunters. And so if you're listening to this and you've never taken that dive, it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what kind of resources you have. It doesn't matter where you're from. Like, I've heard people say, well, I live in a big city where there's nowhere to hunt. I've got good friends in New York City who go on like hunts of a lifetime. Like, don't let something keep you from, in my opinion, the greatest way of life there is. And that's hunting. You talked about it a little bit. You talked about the barriers that you face there a little bit, and I'm excited to jump into that. But, and we're not going to dive into like logistics of your diet, but I'm sure you're a man that consumes a lot of meat. So was the COVID meat crisis like part of that? Like, oh crap, like I need to learn how to harvest my own meat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% a meat eater. I eat a lot of meat. So for me, yeah, going through these times in the last, I guess, 2 years now, it was just kind of, I think, a reality check for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And for me, like I said, being self-reliant has become a huge part of my life. And I'm by no means like a hardcore doomsday prepper, but I like to be prepared. I'd rather have the skills and not need them than need them and not have them, is kind of what I like to say with all that kind of stuff. God forbid I ever had to, or, in the future, like I grew up camping, right? So it's like, if I want to do big camping trips or whatever, I could be in a situation where this is something that I may need to fall back on at some point. So yeah, I would say there's definitely that kind of reality that's set in more so than ever, I would say, with what was going on in the world. And that really had given me a push to, like I said, just want to be more self-reliant in a lot of ways, whether that was hunting, whether that was just survival, type skills, or just being more prepared with my household items. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like I said, just more of a reality check for sure.
I feel like if you're not, you need to watch Alone. That's a great show.
I do. I really like Alone. Yeah, it's kind of funny because, like I said, I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. So, and I've been that way my whole life. So it's a blessing and a curse. But it's funny for like my family members when I'm just like, yeah, I'm going hunting next week, and they're just kind of like, where did that come from? Or, I go from watching like whatever on TV to then it's like binge watching Alone like the whole season in like 2 days. So I've just always been like that, but they get a kick out of it because I'll do it too. Like it escalated from I'm going hunting to then, hey, I got this opportunity to go to Oklahoma and hunt, and they're kind of looking at me like, yeah, that escalated pretty quickly. Like, how did that happen?
Now, speaking of, let me tell the why of why we're going to Oklahoma. We could have hunted Arkansas, we could have hunted Kansas, we could have picked anywhere. But I've got a really good friend, and he runs an outfit down there, and Liberty Ranch Outfitters, which is a world-class outfit. And I am of the opinion that if you're getting into hunting, or if you're making a transition into a new species, find an outfitter, because those guys, they do it for their life. They do it for a living. Those guys can teach you more than anybody. So if you're looking to get into hunting, be it whitetail hunting, find an outfit and then spend a week with them, and spend that whole week. Listen, I've bugged outfitters to death. Spend that whole week asking them questions. Why do you do this? Why are we hunting here? Why are we doing this in this part of the season? I mean, spend that whole time asking them those things. My first bear hunt I went on, I don't want to say mistake, but I did it over the counter with some buddies in Idaho, and went into it blind and unprepared, and I had no understanding of bears and what elevation they would be on during that time of the year, and just struggled. And then the next year hired an outfitter, went on a bear hunt, was super successful, shot a really nice bear, and I learned more from that 1 week of an outfit than I did a month of just trepsing around the mountain trying to find a bear. Now, don't get me wrong. There are tons of things you can learn, and there's lessons you can learn by failure that you'll never learn from an outfit. But I'm of the opinion that hire an outfit, learn a lot, then go out and try to do it yourself. So we're headed to Oklahoma to hunt with Corey there at Liberty Ranch, and just a fantastic ranch there in Oklahoma with crazy awesome whitetails. But yeah, that's why we're going to Oklahoma, because I'm a big proponent of find an outfitter. I still ask Corey, I'm like, hey, they run an insane feeding program. And so as I have my properties here in Kansas, and I'm planning food plots and things for next season, I'm asking those guys, hey, when do you plant this? Why would you plant this over that? And I want to continue to learn from outfitters. So I'm a big proponent of finding an outfitter. So that's why we're going to Oklahoma, as Joey mentioned there. You mentioned a couple barriers of getting into hunting. As you made that step into hunting, what would you say your biggest barriers of entry into the outdoors were?
I think overall it was just intimidating for me of figuring out kind of where to start, right? You're trying to think about, okay, what am I going to hunt? I'm going to hunt a deer. So then what do I need to hunt a deer, right? Am I going to do bow? Am I going to do rifle? Okay, well, if I need a bow, right, like then it comes down to gear. And then it's like, well, even we can backtrack and go, well, where am I going to go? Right. So there are just so many questions of just like I said, from the ground up that I didn't know. And, I started kind of reaching out to some people who I knew were hunters and kind of picking their brain a little bit. But for me, I think the biggest barrier is just where to start, right? Like where to start and why would I do one thing over the other, and we can kind of get into it. But like for me, it may, like I said, these can be blessings, these can be curses, but from what I had heard, is archery can be pretty challenging. And for me, like right away, I was like, I really like the challenge, right? Like, and I thought it would be cool to get into archery first. So, I went out and I purchased a bow, and I talked to the guys at this shop. And, the first thing for me was trying to figure out how do I shoot a compound bow? Because if I can't do that, right, we're never going to get anything. So it was just like one step after another. So it's hard to say exactly like what was the main thing. But I think for me, I mean, just being a beginner was just the amount of information, the decisions I had to make, and then kind of figuring out which route to take and how to go from there.
Yeah, and so for those kind of guys that are facing those same kind of questions and concerns, if you will, I would just start by saying keep it simple. Like when you start watching, and it's the same for anything. Like if I Google like weightlifting, I'm going to find you, and that wouldn't be an entry level. Like I don't want to try those types of things or do those types of things. And the same is true for archery and hunting. Like if you Google, archery hunting, like you're going to find Fred Eichler and he's going to be shooting a recurve in Alaska at Grizzlies. Like that's not where you start. Like, take it down a notch. And the same is true for like even equipment. Like if you Google like archery hunting, like sure you might find, I don't know, you might find John Dudley and he's going to have all the bells and whistles on his bows and all these things. And I just tell people like, slow down, like take it easy. Let's crawl before we walk and let's walk before we run. And that's why like my wife, she's new to archery hunting, and her bow is as simple as it can get. Like she's got a whisker biscuit, she's got a 3-pin sight, nothing fancy about it, doesn't move, doesn't slide. Super simple stabilizer. She's not running back bars and all the gizmos and gadgets and I just tell people like keep it simple as possible. Like and for what that might be different for everybody. Like for some people, a single pin is incredibly simple to understand. For some people, a 3-pin is incredibly easy to understand. I wouldn't suggest jumping into like a multi-pin slider to begin with, because that's, a little more complex and more to it. And so I would just say, start by keeping it simple. Like don't try to overcomplicate everything. Secondly, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, and obviously Joey's not, but, and he said it himself. He said, I reached out to a few guys that I knew hunted. And then when I went into the bow shop, I asked them. And so don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to dive in and look silly. Sound silly and saying, what is this? And people might be like, you serious, dude? But at least you're going to know, like, at least you're going to walk away having known. And Tom Klum, who's kind of been my recurve coach through my process of switching to a recurve, he said it best himself. He's like, if anybody in their right mind had to ask those questions when they began, they won't laugh at you. Like, if that makes sense. Like the people that you're asking the questions, they had to ask the questions at one time too. Like we weren't born with this knowledge. You weren't born with the knowledge of how to sight in a bow. You weren't born with the knowledge of how to French tune a bow. Like you had to learn somewhere. So if anybody in their right mind, you ask them those questions, they're not going to think less of you or laugh at you or make fun of you. Like they're going to answer you because they were there themselves. And for some, not very long ago. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Now, I will say this, though, find reliable resources. And this, again, that goes with anything. Like, I don't want to take weightlifting advice from somebody who's, dying on a deathbed from being obese. Like, maybe I shouldn't say that. But I want to take weightlifting advice from somebody who has succeeded in it. So when I made the switch shooting a recurve, like, I wasn't calling my neighbor down the street who shot a recurve twice in his life. I was calling Jim Willems and Harv Ebers and these legends of bow hunting who have been super successful with recurve in their life and asking them some of the dumbest questions they've ever heard. But I wanted to know that the information I was getting was reliable. So that's what I would just say is don't be afraid to ask questions, but find somebody who's reliable in doing so. Which looking back, like there's so much misinformation out there. And there's so much like old redneck ideology that isn't even correct. Like, but it's been preached and taught and pushed through the generations and anyways, sorry, that's off topic. So, what would you say getting into hunting? What would you say your biggest like questions about hunting were?
I think for me, it's how to figure out how animals operate and move, how to track them. Like you had said, kind of I could connect with about the bear thing, right? Like when I'm out there by myself, trying to figure out, where to sit to have the best chances for, whitetail to come by. I don't know all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's just like when I'm out there, what should I be paying attention to? What are the big things? And like you said, keeping it simple. So it's like instead of getting complicated, if I could put on, a list on my hand, right? Like the 5 things, like what would they be for my best chances of, hunting an animal or whatever I'm trying to hunt. So things like that for me were kind of like my biggest questions. The basics was, when to go out, right? What's the weather supposed to be like? Why is the weather supposed to be that way? Like, even we were having a conversation the other day. You're like, Saturday looks awesome because we got a cold front or something like that. In my mind, I'm like, that's sick, but I don't really know why. So, but it's like stuff like that where I can understand. Like, I like to understand the some of the bells and whistles to make me more successful, or to recognize, is this a good day or a bad day? Like, what are the chances? Are they going to be better, or are they going to be worse, depending on some circumstances that are going on? Where, like you had said, there's so much misinformation out there. Me being in the fitness industry, it's the same exact thing, but I'm the new guy in a whole different environment now. So I want to try to find that reliable information and education.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And again, keeping it simple, like think about the only things you need in life, and not what you want in life, but what you need in life: food, water, and shelter. The same exact thing is true for whitetails. Then come November, then they have another thing on their mind, and we'll get there. That's a whole nother animal, because that is unpacking like the unpredictability of whitetails, and a deer's home range goes from a mile to 7. I mean, just changes everything. But in a year, they need food, water, and shelter. So if you can nail down where are they eating, where are they drinking, and then where are they bedding and sleeping, you're going to kill whitetails. You're going to kill animals. Specifically, I like to hunt travel corridors between them. So if I know they're bedding here and I know they're eating on you'll have to excuse me, I don't know what they have in PA to eat on, but probably acorns, I would imagine. But here in Kansas, a lot of bean fields, corn fields. So I know if they're bedding here, and there's a cornfield here that they're feeding in, I want to be in this patch of woods connecting the two, and they'll be coming through there from bedding to feed and feed to bedding. So if you think about it like that, because again, this is my biggest downfall in hunting, is like overthinking where to set up. And I did a podcast not too long ago, and I wish I could remember who I was talking to refer back to it. But I did a podcast not too long ago. I talked about the season of struggle I had been having because I tried to overcomplicate where to set up. And I had this new property, and it was phenomenal, huge whitetails on it, and I had overthought where to set up. And this guy said, who was I stinking talking to? Anyways, in the episode, he said, just pull out, like back out, observe, sit on top of a hill and observe where are they coming from, where are they going. And I'm like, duh. Like I try to and I did that. And the next day I shot a whitetail, and the struggle was over. Why? Because I got out of my own head. I quit trying to complicate it on, well, what if they're coming from this direction to go over here? And what if, anyways, I unpacked my mind, and I simplified it down from they're bedding here and they're coming out to feed here. So just set here. And the next day I went back and sat there and shot a whitetail. So when we keep it simple, and when we tone everything else out of our minds and just say, okay, I know what they need to survive, where are they going to be? Now, so we're hunting late season. We're going to be hunting December 9th and 10th, I believe. So it's late season. Now, I have heard that they're still responding really well to grunts and rattles down there. So there might still be a little bit of rutting going on. But think about it like this, Joey. In the late season, like when you get done with a super hard workout, like when you've just competed in a strongman contest, where are you going?
I'm just going home.
You're not going to eat?
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I'm going to go to eat. Yeah, right after. Yes.
Yeah, because you gotta replenish everything.
Fuel up.
Yeah, you've just depleted everything. Late season for me is the easiest time to hunt because deer have spent all of November pounding themselves into the ground. They've chased does all day. They've been running themselves ragged. They haven't been eating. They haven't been sleeping well because they're just trying to get some. And so come December, you better believe they're going to be on food, and they're going to be on food regularly because they have to, just like after a big workout, they have to start replenishing. Like they have to, or they'll die. Like they have to recharge the batteries and get fattened back up for a harsh winter. And so late season, I would say target food incredibly hard, which I know we're going to this week in Oklahoma. I know we'll be sitting over some food plots. But late and again, it goes back to just like we overcomplicate everything. But when we think about it like that, like when we think about, well, they've had a hard month, what are they going to be doing? Well, they're going to be eating. They're going to be replenishing their fat stores. So I need to be hunting on food. Like we try to overcomplicate deer and I probably shouldn't have jumped so far into Saturday's going to be good because of a cold front, because that does get more into like the predicting of deer movement, which is, a little more, yeah, I don't want to say advanced, but the simplicity of it is it's late season, they'll be on food. And so I will say this, though, a great tool to use to really begin understanding this isn't just for Joey, this is for anyone. A great tool to begin using is HuntWise. The HuntWise app is a great tool at understanding weather and how they're going to respond to moon phases and pressure rises and cold fronts and different winds and so on and so forth. So I would certainly go check out HuntWise. What would you say outside of like the how to hunt, like questions about, and you mentioned it yourself about gear and what would you say like your biggest questions leading up into hunting about like gear would be?
I guess just all the different bells and whistles of things, like what separates, $100 pair of pants from $500 pair of pants. And, as a beginner, like where would I start, right? You talk about different seasons. So do I need a pair of pants for every season? Is there something that covers, across the board, right? Like I'm also a guy who like does like gear. Like I'm not going to lie, like I can get into it. I like going on YouTube and reviewing it. So, it depends on what it is. But at the same time, I like to know, okay, this is what you really should invest in, and this is what's worth it. And then here's where like you probably don't need to buy, or spend this much money on this, So I think that's maybe a good question, for me, and like the people who listen to this podcast, because it's easy to get overwhelmed. And even like when it comes to my bow, I remember being like, you have a whisker biscuit versus, I guess, like some sort of drop, right? I don't know the correct terminology of it. But you're sitting there and you're like, okay, if I'm beginning, is spending the extra couple $100 on this, is that worth it? Is it not worth it? Right? Like, I don't know. Or arrows, like stuff like that. So for me, I think that's kind of the basis of what I would ask, you is like, these are the essentials that you want to spend a lot of money on and don't be cheap on. And here's where it probably doesn't matter as much, and you can get away with certain things.
So you like gear.
I do.
I'm currently rotating the arrows I built for you in front of the camera.
The Freedom Flyers.
The Freedom Meat Seekers. No, you say you like gear. I've called myself several times a gear junkie. It's a problem. It's an addiction. Like if I could turn my camera around in my room, on that shelf, you've got like 4 sights and over there's spotting scopes and binoculars and 5 dozen different arrows, and there's a closet full of camo. And I'm a gear junkie, just like yourself. I love new gear. I would say the biggest thing people neglect, and the biggest thing when you're going to go and you're going to start this tackling, is everybody wants, be it cool camo or cool bows or cool whatever. At the end of the day, no matter what you have, whether you've got a pair of $800 binoculars or $1,400 binoculars, doesn't matter. The only thing that is going to come in contact with that animal, and the first thing that comes in contact with that animal, is that arrow. And I think people neglect, and that's not just beginners. Like that's not even like, it's my pet peeve when we start talking hunting, and I'm like, what arrow setup are you running? They're like, I ran out, whatever. And I'm like, really? Like you told me what bow you were shooting, what sights, what red. I mean, you told me everything about all your other setup, but you never even put thought into the arrow that's contacting the deer, or the elk, whatever it might be. And so I say put a lot of money into arrows, which a lot of money, $200, for good arrows, which, you've got yourself here, just about the best arrow you can buy, in my opinion. But do research on and this goes for everybody. Like, do research on what causes an arrow to fly good, because we went through and a lot of people are still stuck in it, but like the hunting world and the bow hunting world went through like this decade of like speed, and wanting fast, and I'm like, why? Like, why do you care how fast the arrow's going? So think about it like this, Joey. Would you rather me throw a ping pong ball at you 100 mile an hour or a bowling ball at you 10 mile an hour? Which one's going to hurt worse?
I mean, the bowling ball is definitely
Exactly.
gonna.
Like, I don't care how fast my arrow's going. I want the arrow to hit them and knock them off their stinking feet. So Joey here, just tell you the setup you're running, and so the listener can hear. It's a silencer shaft from Deer Crossing Archery, which, for those of you who are not familiar with Deer Crossing Archery, that is their micro diameter shaft. I'm a big proponent of micro diameters. They're heavier walled, so they're going to be heavier, but it's also a smaller shaft to get through the animal, so you're going to get better penetration. 350 spine. You're running, let me do the math here in my head, 235 grains out front. And that's what's going to hit that animal and knock it off its stinking feet. So for those of you who are just getting into bow hunting, I'm going to say this: don't get caught up in the speed game. Don't get caught up in how fast is your bow shooting. I put your arrows on the scale at the bow shop, and the guy said, well, they're just about maxing out my scale. And I'm like, that's good. But they're flying phenomenal. Shot your bow a bit this week, and flying great out of that bow. So I would say don't get caught up in the speed game, and really, when you talk about what to put money towards, in my opinion, you can spend all the money you want on bows and camo and boots and all the fancy stuff you want. But if you ain't got a good arrow, why in the crap are you out there? Because that's the only thing that's going to touch the animal anyways. Same is true with broadhead. And broadhead even more so, because it's quite literally the first part of the first arrow that does touch them. And people just never put thought into it. People never consider their broadheads and their arrow setups, and they just want fancy everything else and to look cool. And so I would say, when it comes to the simple part of bow hunting, don't neglect your arrow and broadhead setup. Don't skip out on that. And then as far as like your question on like what gear to not skimp out on, and clothing is a big one. But it changes per hunt. Like if I'm going on a Western hunt where I'm going to be packing in 12 miles, that bear hunt, for instance, we packed in like 14 miles. Don't neglect your boots. Like I don't care if I don't have a tent to sleep in, I'm going to buy good boots. But other than that, like when it comes to like whitetail hunting deer, I would say the first thing that you should put your thought into is your arrow and broadhead setup, and putting a good portion of your budget towards that. Clothing, that's a tricky one, man. Because again, I'm a guy that I like gear, and I like to have a system for everything. I will say this though. I got to say this without making anybody mad. You said, what's the difference between $100 pair of pants and a $500 pair of pants? Could possibly just be a logo. Like, could possibly just be what's on the clothes. And I'm not going to name any names, but some of the super expensive brands that you can automatically think of in your mind when you hear me talking, they're not even built for whitetails. Like they're built for mountains and fast hunting and running up the mountain, and that's a complete different kind of system. And again, I'm not going to name any names, but when I say this slogan, you'll get it. But it's like ultralight hunting gear. Well, something that's ultralight is missing out on something else. Like, and again, I'm not saying it's bad gear, but if it's ultralight, it's missing out on something else. And so I would just say start by looking at the species you're hunting, which you said that. You said whitetail. You wanted to start by looking at whitetail. Well, look at whitetail clothing systems because I don't need a super lightweight. I'm not walking in 3 miles. We're driving a side by side 100 yards from our tree stand and walking in. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't need to have that super awesome layering system. Now, I will say this about clothing, and for any beginner, I'm a huge proponent, especially for comfortability, of having a layering system. Not just one big piece of gear that you put on when it gets cold and one small piece of gear when it's warm. Have that system that you can build on. Like when I go hunting, and I'll show you all this, Joey, but like when I go hunting, like say it's 20 degrees in the morning. Well, I know it's going to be 40 by the time I walk out. So I might start with a heavier jacket, have a vest and a base layer underneath that. And then I know once it gets 40 and I want to walk out, I can unzip my jacket, have a vest and a base layer and be fine. Rather than just, I'm either hot or I'm cold. And so I'm a big proponent of having that layering system of I can peel layers off or I can put layers on depending on what the weather does. Because if you're not comfortable, you're not going to stay out there. And if you're not comfortable, you're not going to be still. You're not going to be quiet. You're not going to be focused. Dude, I've missed deer because I wasn't focused because I was cold. Like I've missed deer because I'm sitting there shivering and then they come in and I'm like, oh crap, I'm not even ready. And so being comfortable is a huge part of the hunt. And so it's kind of hard to walk through a layering system, but this might be more for video content. But when you look at my bottoms, I'm going to start with a base layer, a merino wool base layer next to skin. I've got like a 3/4 zip base layer that can zip off, so I don't have to take my boots off to get them off. And then depending on how cold it is or what it is, my pair of pants. So that gives me 2 layers underneath my pants I can take off if it gets hot or cold. And so no matter what your budget is on clothing, and this doesn't just go for Joey, this goes for anybody getting into it. No matter what your budget is, you can build a layering system. Like you can build that system of I've got a base layer, I've got a vest, I've got a puffer jacket that's insulated, I've got a raincoat, and I've got a heavy coat. Like you can build that layering system, and you can build it for cheap. And obviously, I'm a huge proponent of scent lock, but my first like puffer jacket, I went to like a Eddie Bauer outlet and got one for like $40, and it worked perfect. So you can build that layering system for cheap. But I would say when you start with clothing, don't just start with, okay, I'm going to get a late season jacket, an early season jacket, and I'll be good. Like start with a system to where no matter how cold it gets or wet it gets, then you still know you're covered. And you know that you can peel layers off or put layers on to stay comfortable. Let's dive into kind of your expectations of the hunt, to kind of put a bow on this, I guess. Heading into a hunt, you hear you're hunting in Oklahoma, you hear the words world-class outfitter. Like what are your expectations leading into a hunt?
I mean, I'm just super excited to be honest with you. Like, I'm one of those guys where just the experience alone is enough for me. Like, obviously, our goal is to kill something, right? Like that's why we're hunting. But at the same time, even if it didn't, for me, the experience of going out to a world class outfitter, being surrounded by that caliber of hunters and environment, terrain, etc., automatically is a win for me because I'll be able to learn so much. And just like you had said, you when you went on that bear hunt, right? Like you learned so much from doing that versus being out on your own. So for me, getting into it, I feel like one of the best things I could have done was take on this experience, which is just going to teach me so much that can set me up for success down the road. The connections that I've made through you and the people we'll meet. It's just going to be phenomenal. Like like I said, I'm just so excited to be able to do this and, pick your guys' brains. Like you said, I'll be sitting there asking tons of questions and learning as much as I can. So I'm just trying to be a sponge and absorb it all. And like I said, hopefully top it off with, killing something, which would be, first for me when it comes to big game. And and I'll be smiling ear to ear. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I'll get buck fever or piss my pants. I'm not sure. So we'll see.
Oh man, I can't wait, dude. I literally can't wait. I'm going to run you through Joey's bow setup real quick. Before I do need to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Koa Optics. I'm a big fan of nice optics, going back to being a gear junkie. Love optics, and I found and experienced Koa Optics. I was in Idaho on a bear hunt with the guys from SNS Archery. They carry Koa Optics, and I started playing with one while I was in their store, and I'm like, dude, these things are freaking great. And since then, I've been hooked on Koa. All my binoculars, all my spotting scopes, all Koa. The finest Japanese-made glass I've ever found. So if you're in the market for some new optics, be it binoculars or spotting scopes, you guys got to go check out Koa Optics. Now on to your setup. I've already walked you through the arrow setup that Joey's going to be running. Joey's going to be shooting the Bear Redemption, which is the 2021 flagship bow. The Bear Redemption. Now I did say, and I gotta backtrack and step on my own feet here. I said I wouldn't start somebody with a 3-pin slider. Joey is starting with a 3-pin slider just because that's what I had on my bow. So sorry. In my opinion, it's the best sight you could ever have. And really, this is kind of a mixture of different sights. I actually took the base off of a single pin sight. And this really isn't, I'm not telling you this information really for you, but for the listener. I got a single pin React Pro dovetail. I took the housing of that off, and I put the housing of a React Trio on that. That way I have a 3-pin slider on a dovetail. So that's the sight that Joey's going to be running, which in my opinion is the most bulletproof, best sight you could ever have. Joey, are you familiar with a 3-pin slider at all?
I don't know a 3-pin slider, but I know that mine has 3 pins on the sight. So I don't know if that's the difference with the slider in there or not, but I have a 3-pin sight.
So for those of you who are new and maybe have that question like Joey about the slider. So you've got your 3 pins. You've got 20, 30, 40. Now you've also a dial on the bow. So I don't know if you can see that moving there. But you've got a dial on the bow. So if a deer steps out at 60, which I'm not recommending you shoot a deer at 60, or anybody, whitetails are too fast for that. But so if a deer steps out at 60, you dial that down to 60, and then your bottom pin has now become what's called a floater, or a slider. So you've got 20, 30, 40, but you can also slide that down to shoot all the way out to 120 yards with how I have this set up using the bottom pin. So on a slider, once you move the sight, now only your bottom pin is relevant. And now only your bottom pin is what you would use. So you could move it down to 50, 60, 70, 80, and that bottom pin becomes the pin you would use. So, which is why I like a 3-pin slider, because rather than a single pin where you have to move it no matter what, I've got my 3 like tree stand bow hunting setup 3-pin sight. But then if something does happen and it's a little further, I can slide that down and still make the shot. So that's what he's shooting on sights. Got a whisker biscuit for a rest. Not only for beginners do I recommend whisker biscuit. I still personally shoot a whisker. I actually made the switch back to a whisker biscuit after the better part of 10 years with a drop away. Made the switch to a whisker biscuit back. And I get a whole lot of questions about why a whisker biscuit. And the only answer I have for that, why not? Like people are like, well, speed, you're going to lose some speed. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I might lose 1-2 feet per second off my arrow, but who in the crud cares? They're absolutely bulletproof. Nothing can go wrong with them. Great rest. That's what he's running on his rest. Got a Trophy Ridge Hitman stabilizer and a Hex Light quiver. So that's Joey's setup that he's going to be hunting with here in Oklahoma. Again, I got to shoot it a little bit this week. I went out and shot at some. Now, let me just say this, sales pitch real quick about Bear Archery's bows here. I don't give a lot of sales pitches, but if you're on Bear's podcast, you can do that, right? This bow had been set up at 27.5 inches. I shot a buck with this very bow 3 days before I changed it. Figured out Joey's draw length, and within like 3 minutes, this bow is set up shooting at 29.5. And that's what I love about Bear Archery is I could change this bow right now back down to my wife to shoot it tonight, and then change it back ready for you to shoot it when you get here. Just phenomenal adjustability, which is one of the things I love about bear archery. So the bear archery redemption is what you're going to be shooting there. Now, Joey, I always end my episode with what I call the Hunting 101 field notes. So if you're not familiar with Fred Bear, the founder of Bear Archery and the godfathers of bow hunting, if not the godfather of bow hunting, he was big on field notes, jotting down what he's learned over the years. And so you've been on a few hunts. What would you say out of those first few hunts, like the first lesson you learned in hunting would be?
Dress warm.
There you go.
Yeah. I kind of like you were saying, one of the first times I had gone out, I didn't anticipate the cold. And, I'm sitting there shivering, and like you said, your focus is off. And in my head, it had dawned on me, okay, so if a deer did come out, I feel like I would have been kind of so messed up from the cold that it could have affected my shot or my mood, my focus, all those things. So for me, prioritizing like that layering system that you had talked about has been a game changer where, now I know what it takes just from being out at certain temperatures from where I live, that I can be comfortable. I can, be able to focus on what I have to do. And it's no longer a part of the equation that I'm worrying about.
That's awesome, man. You went with Scentlock, didn't you?
Yeah, I got the, I think it's the Bow Hunter Elite. I got the jacket and the pants.
Awesome, man. That is, I think that's something that for some, it takes longer to understand. Like they take longer to get that. Like I'm shivering here, bitterly cold. I wonder why I'm not seeing deer. I wonder why I'm leaving early. I wonder why. Well, it's because you're sitting there freezing cold. And I had somebody come into my room not too long ago, and I've got totes labeled merino wool and base layers, and then I've got a closet full. And they're like, "Why all the clothing?" And I'm like, "Well, because I can go out and sleep in -20. Could you?" And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "I want to be prepared for anything, Like I want to, like if you say let's go duck hunting and it's -4, like I'm ready." And so yeah, man, that's a good lesson that a lot of people should learn, maybe faster, because there's a reason that you're miserable, and there's a reason that you have a bad idea in your mind about hunting and what hunting is. Well, it's because you're uncomfortable. Same is true with, boots out west or name it, whatever, backpacks. I mean, if something is creating you to be miserable and to not enjoy your time, change it, fix it, because it'll make you more successful, it'll make you a better hunter. Well, Joey, thanks so much for coming on, man. I cannot wait. We're going to have a good time. Guys, tune in. Joey, where can they find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram, Zatstrength, SZAT, then the word strength. That's basically across all platforms, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, website, zatstrength.net. And gym is the Lion's Den. That's in Colmar, PA. So if you're ever in PA or outside of Philadelphia, come on, check it out and get some training in.
Wait a second. You're not a Penn State fan, are you?
This is actually a fun fact, is I was an athlete my whole life, but I do not follow sports whatsoever. Okay, good. So answer is probably no, which is good for you probably right now. So
yeah, they just announced bowl games, and we play Penn State January 1st. So
okay,
I just thought that. I'm like, well, man, wait a second. Can he come to my house?
I was gonna say I'm not allowed over. I might.
I did a thing one time. And it was for ministry, but we had one of the kickoff returners for K-State come to our church. And the week before, we played Arkansas played K-State in a bowl game. And I texted him the day before the game, and probably shouldn't do that for somebody getting ready for a huge game, but I just said, "Hey man, depending on the outcome of this game, you might not be coming to our church, man." But we ended up killing them, so that was great. So I say that to say this: go follow Joey, because we're gonna kind of try to be documenting what's going on all week. How the hunt's going, who shot a deer, where they shot it, blah 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 blah. You can follow me on social media. Tune into Bear Archery social media. Tune into Bear Archery's YouTube, because I talked to the guys this morning. They're like, if he kills a deer, man, we're gonna make a big deal about it, and we're gonna put out a big thing. So tune into Bear Archery social media. Tune into my social media, Joey's social media, to kind of follow the documentation of this hunt. Tune in next week to hear how our hunt went, to hear what Joey learned, were his expectations met, so on and so forth. Guys, thanks for listening. Before we do go, I do got to give a quick thank you to Minus 33. In my opinion, the very best in the merino wool game, which we've talked a lot about clothing and layering. And it's something I'm excited to talk to you about, Joey, the benefits of merino wool and the game-changing benefits of merino wool. So if you don't have any merino wool, or if you're in the market for some new merino, go check out Minus 33, because it has changed the way that I layer by far. So go check out Minus 33. Guys, thanks for listening. Have a great week, and we will see you back here next week.